Okay, so we haven't got very far into the book. We're still into the introduction with extinct. Okay, so mass extinction. Half of us are going to die like by 2070. So what have you got to say about that?
Yeah, so the claims that we're in a sixth mass extinction are just false, just full stop. Like sometimes I have a criticism of something where I'll be like, that's misleading or that's an exaggeration. No, the claims that we're in a mass extinction are false. 6% of species identified by the main scientific body, the International Union of the Conservation of Nature, 6% are labeled critically endangered. But even those 6%, and by the way, and I care about the 6%, and I take actions to actually try to conserve more of those species. But there's no reason to think that any of those species need to go extinct. We can save those species from extinction. But a mass extinction is over 75% of all species on Earth going extinct. Well, we're not anywhere close to that. And the main factor behind what kills endangered species is either killing them outright, often for food, or second, using their habitat mostly for agriculture, since humans use half of the ice-free surface of the Earth. And of that half, over 95% of it is for food production. Half of that half, 1/4 of the ice-free surface of the Earth, is just for meat production. Well, here you have maybe the biggest piece of good news is that the amount of land that humans use for meat production has declined by an area 80% the size of Brazil. Well, that's a huge landmass.
Over what period of time?
Since the year 2000.
Since 2000?
Yeah.
20 years.
Yeah. And people say, how have we done that? Well, it's pretty darn easy. You can produce 100 cows on an acre of land or 1 cow. So you just concentrate your animal production. There's some ethical issues that you have to deal with, but mostly in terms of at least cattle production, which is the big use of pasture. It's been, there's a win-win for treating cows humanely, as I document, thanks to Temple Grandin.
Temple Grandin, yeah, she's really something, that woman.
She's an incredible person and shows what neuroatypical people are able to contribute to this world in a really lovely way, that they don't need to become the negative side of that often.
Yeah, she says she thinks like an animal. She really believes she thinks like an animal.
Yeah.
And I heard her speak at a conference on consciousness. It was a great talk. And she's so pragmatic and she's done a tremendous amount for animal welfare. And in this practical sense of actually fixing something, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yeah,
good for her.
It turns out that cows, what they want to live a happy life is not the same thing as what we think we want cows to have. We think cows need to have a whole acre of land for him or herself. Cows just need to not be terrified before they die, and they need to be in clean stalls and stuff like that. So there's a win-win-win on humane animal treatment, land use, which is essential to protecting species, and human prosperity and development. And this is an incredible story. So the whole sixth extinction narrative is just false, and I debunk it. The other way it's false, as you alluded to earlier, we have seen biodiversity in many parts of the world increase, but with the rise of invasive species. And you may not want that. So diversity is the wrong metric. So in Hawaii, you know, if you agree with, look, this is a non-scientific issue. It's just a question of what species do you want on the islands of Hawaii? Do you want the native species, meaning the species that were there?
Yeah. Well, underneath that is also this issue of purity and disgust and borders. It's like, well, that was nature before the invasive species, and that nature is somehow allied in your mind with ethical purity, and these invasive species are somehow aligned in your mind with something disgusting and inappropriate. And there's an ethical element to that, and you haven't sorted any of that out in your thinking, because, like, do the islands care? Life moves around, and that's how it is. And so there's a weird unexamined projection of a religious issue onto what's hypothetically a scientific issue, and mucky thinking.
What was defined as natural in Hawaii or in the Americas or anywhere is pre-European. So the purity is so Europeans are the contaminators.
Right.
But as opposed to like the indigenous people who were manipulating ecosystems at continent-wide levels, right, through fire mostly, but also through hunting and extinctions, certainly in the Americas, but also really around the world. You have this alteration of ecosystems by pure indigenous people. So in any event, yeah, if you want to save the species that were in Hawaii before 1500 or 1700, that's fine, but you can make a case for that not on purity grounds or spiritual grounds, just because you're worried you like those species. You know, there's some cool bird species that could go extinct, you know, on the islands of Hawaii if you don't remove some of the invasives. Fine, you're just manipulating that environment. You're doing it not out of science. There's no scientific basis for it. You're doing it because we like those species, and that's it. That's where I get to at the end of the book, where I kind of go, I can't, if I show you a picture of an endangered mountain gorilla of Rwanda or the Congo, and I'm like, I want to save that gorilla, and if you're like, I don't care about that gorilla, that's a clash of values. There's no scientific argument I can make to saving those mountain gorillas. I think they're really beautiful and amazing, and they remind us of our common ancestors or whatever it may be. But there's no, like, that's not going to be solved by some scientific analysis.
No, and we still have to, even if that is true, we still have to have a serious discussion at the policy and ethical level about what steps are being taken by hypothetically well-meaning, ignorant Westerners who think in a low-resolution manner and whose thoughts are contaminated by unaddressed ethical concerns, asking poor people in developing countries to sacrifice their lives often to protect animals. It's like, well, first of all, that isn't going to work in the long run because they're just going to kill the damn animals. And that's exactly what you would do if you were there as well. And they're not, you can't just ignore them. And that kind of gets shunted into the, well, you know, they're human beings contaminating the planet anyways, and so the animals should come first or something like that. And not helpful.